IT industry now for 19 years. And through that time, I've worked a whole bunch of different types of IT jobs, doing support and building systems and all sorts of things. And the reason I've chosen the topic today around avoiding digital disaster is it is one of the most catastrophic types of event that I see happen time and time again, that people lose massive amounts of organizational knowledge in the form of documents and other data, which is so easily avoided. So I'm hoping to shine some light on that today and hopefully give you some easy steps of how to become a more resilient organization with your digital setups. So today I'm going to run through, you can hopefully see as I change screens, just a little bit of why I think this is worth talking about. Discussing briefly what the cloud actually is. It's a term that gets thrown around a bit, but it's actually quite simple. The fragility of IT devices, which no doubt many of you have experienced yourselves, what it looks like when things do go wrong, and then cloud storage, what that actually means, what it does, what backups and syncing actually are in very simple terms. And then we look at some solutions for digital resilience long term. I'm going to be looking at a particular product today, but we will go through some alternatives in the form of OneDrive and then alternatives to it. Some common concerns, general core principles around cloud storage and how to do it right, a realistic baseline, things you can take away from today and implement hopefully very quickly and simply to safeguard your future, and then just some key takeaways at the end. All right, cool. Why I think this matters. So organizations often think of their assets in terms of physical items or financial holdings or their people, but files and data are organizational assets and deserve the same levels of protection and care that any others do. A lot of data loss is accidental. There are such things out there as viruses and ransomware and all sorts, but in practice, we see far more cases that data loss is a simple spilled coffee on the keyboard or a dropped laptop or an accidental deletion of a file. So we want to make sure that individuals and organizations are resilient to all sorts of data loss. Quite often we do see, especially in smaller organizations, that a single device somewhere, be it a laptop or a shared drive or a hard drive somewhere, has the only copy of critical documents, and loss of that piece of equipment can erase quite a lot of effort and require a lot of labor to get back to that same point. Data recovery exists in the world. If you lose data, there are ways that you can get it recovered. Those are never guaranteed and are often quite slow and costly. So we look to what steps we can take in a practical sense to not need to go down that road at all. And small and simple decisions, building small digital habits can save a great deal of grief down the road. Some very small changes in how you interact with your files can mean that if the day ever comes where a critical piece of equipment fails, you're not left back at the starting line. You've still got access to all of the most important files and data for your organization. All right, so the cloud. You've probably heard people talk about the cloud before. It sounds like some magical space off in the abstract in cyberspace. It's really none of that. The cloud can be explained in a number of ways, but all of them boil down to it's a computer, or in our case, for the purpose of today, a folder on a computer that you don't own, but you access over the internet. It is managed by you, but maintained for you. And what that means is it recognizes you. When you log into cloud storage, the you is very much underlined. It doesn't care what device you're looking from. It cares that you can prove sufficiently who you are to give you access to the files. And that already takes away one of the biggest causes of disaster in IT, which is a particular piece of equipment failing. You access it over the internet, although in practical terms, you interact with it just like it's right there on your computer, like you already handle your files in your operating system now. What I mean by managed by you, the actual contents of what is essentially just a folder that sits in the cloud. Managed by you means you're in control of what goes in, what level of access gets granted, if any, to anyone. And maintained for you means that all of the things like applying updates, security patches, making sure that the latest threats are safeguarded against is done by the person who hosts the entire cloud. So if that's OneDrive, that'd be Microsoft. If it's Google Drive, not surprisingly, it's Google, etc. So all of that maintenance work gets done on your behalf, and the content is then exclusively for your use. Devices are fragile, IT devices especially so. They are fundamentally machines that have moving parts and a life expectancy. So when we say that laptops and desktops do fail, that's not a hypothetical. If we tried booting something up that was working in perfect order 25 years ago, a computer from back then, it would be an amazing thing if it actually turned on without some sort of problem. Damage, loss, and theft also happen. Some of those are an unfortunate reality of working with physical hardware in the real world. But also in the software world, files can be deleted or overwritten, which is another common cause that I see for data loss, is that something's been accidentally moved from where it should have been and lost. Viruses and ransomware are things that exist. We're not going to focus too much on those because the same safeguards that help with the more common cases will also help in the event that you do get hit with a ransomware attack or a virus messes with your data. And a critical thing about IT is that computers are a whole series of small systems working in harmony, or sometimes a little bit slowly, but either way, working together to give you the experience that you normally have on a computer. They don't tend to break gradually. Sometimes they'll go a bit slow for a while and then give up, but more often they work fine yesterday and you press the button today and the light doesn't come on and the machine doesn't boot up, which is why it's important to make sure that you take steps to safeguard the important files and data before a situation where a device packs up and gives up. All right, when things go wrong, you've got a whole number of things that can go wrong with IT devices. And this is a sort of a simplified version of what process you might go through at that point. First of all, if you still have the device, if it hasn't been nicked or stolen or hopefully still sitting in a lost and found somewhere, if you have the device, then you have a chance at potentially getting your data back. But if you don't, unless you've got recent copies that are good enough, maybe stowed away in a drawer or a mailbox, those files are probably gone. If you do have the device and you can still turn it on, then you can probably proceed. If you can't turn it on, there is some chance that you'll be able to get it repaired and then we carry forward. But if not, again, unless you've got some sort of backup that you can rely on, that you can go back to, it's probably going to mean that you've lost some significant amount of data. Similarly, even if it turns on, whether your files are still there, whether you can still open them, and whether there's still data inside those files are all sort of decision points where if the answer is no, you may well have lost a significant amount of data. And what I'm talking about today is using cloud storage, which rather than interfering with any of this decision path, it puts a bit of a bar above the top and says, do you have an up-to-date cloud-based copy of your most important files? Now, if you do, awesome. You can get your files back. You're not reset back to before you had any. You probably still will want to track down the device, get it repaired, potentially still have recoveries done. But at least your most critical data, your digital assets, and they are assets, are available to you and you can bring them down into a potentially new machine or a refurbished or whatever the recovery path is for the missing piece of infrastructure. You'll be able to get those files back and importantly, the knowledge that those files represent. So cloud storage, we've got our little folder in the cloud. It does a few things for you. It is not just backups, which we'll talk to in a moment. What it effectively is a space that is exclusively yours that sits on a computer, for want of a better term, sitting across the internet from you. So for explanation purposes, while it's almost certainly not going to be a laptop on the other side of the internet, it might as well be for our purposes. So when you're using a work device, a laptop, for example, if you're sitting with it completely offline and it has no cloud storage connection, if that device disappears, then the files on it will go as well. However, if you have a cloud storage tool set up and running, which is quite simple to do, what will happen in practice is those files that you're working on will automatically synchronize and a copy of them will go up into the cloud, which again is just a computer across the internet, or in the reality, many pieces of computer across the internet to make sure that one going down doesn't cause you a problem on that side. The data can go up into that device and you keep working. As far as you can tell, nothing's really happened. You've still got your local file. You work exactly the same way as you always do, but there's a silent copy that's been put in a protective archive that only you have access to, so that in the event that you need to bring those files back down, either to the same machine or to a different device, you can. So automatically it'll back up your device, your files. It'll keep copies on and off your device. So if something happens to that device, the files aren't lost. And you can also use this to work a bit smarter. You can synchronize the latest copy of files between devices. So in our example down here, if I've saved a file on my work laptop, it's made a copy up to the cloud. If I then decide when I'm home, I don't want to pull the laptop out, but I do want to read something in a document, I can use another device, maybe a different laptop or my mobile phone, and I can access those files that are stored on the cloud. And what that means is this second device, which didn't know the file existed this morning when you created it, is going to have a look on the cloud and see, is there a file that I don't have? If so, show it and make it available. If it already knows about the file, it's going to check, do I have the latest copy with all of the last changes? And if the answer is no, again, it's going to reach up onto the cloud and grab the latest changes and make them available on the second device. So synchronizing your work across multiple devices, I know I keep using that word, I'm sorry, there aren't many good ones, will allow you to potentially do some things that you couldn't do before whilst keeping your files safe as well. Another advantage is these cloud services, cloud storage services, allow you to recover lost or changed files. If a file, for example, has pages of content accidentally deleted, that is a change and it will save straight up to the cloud. However, all of the cloud technologies I'll touch on today will allow you to effectively wind that file back in time to a version before that deletion took place. You can even keep the latest copy as well if it's got new information in it that you don't want to lose. So you can drag content from both of them and rebuild to where it should have been in the first place. And as I will keep stressing, using cloud storage keeps you working even if devices fail. So if that one laptop that's got all of your financials on it goes kaput one day, you can still get another device, get those files back in the state that they were, and keep on working. All right, two related but fundamentally different concepts that I just want to demystify a little bit. Backups are a very important thing and are critical in a large IT environment or some small IT environments as well. They serve a very important goal. It is separate to and aside from what I'm talking about today, which is building digital resilience by syncing or synchronizing your files to a cloud storage location. It's actually quite good to be doing both as a standard practice. Backups are important to give you a restore point, back when everything was last all working harmoniously. They will take a point in time copy of files. So if you did the backup last week, it's got last week's files. Whereas when you sync with a cloud storage device, you are always keeping all versions of the file at their most current. A backup will require periodic management. Even if it's just putting things on a thumb drive and putting that in a drawer, you need to remember to do that. Whereas syncing to the cloud is typically a zero-click process. Once it's set up, it happens silently in the background and keeps everything permanently up to date. A backup will spread the risk of a device failing across two devices, the original and the backup device, whereas syncing spreads the risk across many, many devices. Because the technologies that provide us with cloud storage are typically hosted by large IT companies, Microsoft, Google, and the like, they are able to set things up in such a way that they could have a catastrophic failure of their own. They could lose half their systems, and all of the contents of your folder in the cloud would remain safe and available to you because they're able to spread that risk across many hundreds of devices so that the likelihood across multiple geographies of enough going down that it causes a problem to the users is essentially zero. Backups do come with a cost, even if it's just putting things on a thumb drive. That thumb drive needs to be bought, it needs to be stored. The cost can be small, it could also be huge if you're doing magnetic tape backups or some big industry version. Whereas using synchronizing of files into cloud storage will generally cost zero and may cost a little bit if you get into super huge amounts of data that you want to keep synchronized, which even in my years in IT, a small organization has never hit the limits that I've seen that are available at the moment for free from the major players. The backup will probably work when it's needed. If you pull that thumb drive out of your drawer and plug it in, it's probably going to let you access those files. But the longer it's been sitting in that drawer, the less I would want to bet my house on it. Whereas syncing requires internet access, but provided it's got that, it will work when you need it. And backups are really there to safeguard data. That's all they do. Syncing files to cloud storage, however, allows you to safeguard the data while also giving you the ability to share with other individuals, either to read the files or to edit them or to collaborate in real time with multiple people in the same document if you choose. They provide file versioning, so each update you make will store a version that you can restore back to if something has gone awry somewhere along the way. And they also allow you to access your files from multiple places and multiple devices, which in the modern world, most people have access to multiple devices, be it a laptop, an iPad, a mobile phone, a desktop computer at home. And it allows you to safely and securely get access to that data from virtually anywhere. So I'm going to zoom in on OneDrive a little bit. This is not a technical talk today. It's really just looking at the pillars and fundamentals of how this stuff works. OneDrive has a very simple setup, and you'll see it comes with its own little diagram that looks a little bit like mine did before. When it's on your computer, it just looks like a regular folder. You open it just like you would on your C drive or documents folder. And when you save on your device to that folder, it will save both the file on your hard drive where you would expect it to be in your documents folder, wherever, and it will silently synchronize a copy up to the cloud. And that's what keeps you safe along the way. It means that the device or the files will be available on any device that you sign into. I'm not going to deep dive into multi-factor authentication today, MFA. You almost certainly know what that is, even if you don't know the term. It's when you get a code from your bank, for example, to validate that it's really you logging in. I would highly recommend multi-factor authentication for any digital accounts that you rely on. That being said, having that multi-factor authentication and knowing your password proves enough that it is you accessing that your files can be safely made available to you on any device, whether it's borrowed, whether it's a replacement, anywhere. And it keeps all devices up to date at all times. So if you are working across multiple devices, each update will iterate a new version on the cloud, which all other signed in devices can immediately see and access and get the latest changes. There will still be times when it makes sense to email a copy of a file to yourself, to somebody else. Those are generally times when this is the version that needs to exist in your or someone else's life that you can package up and distribute. One of the things that OneDrive lets you do, in addition to synchronizing your files, is share files individually or even whole folders, which will stay up to date with the files as they move into and out of those folders, with either collaborators or people who you want to be able to read those documents or access those files. And all of the tools we'll talk about today, including OneDrive especially, support some level of live collaboration. So while you're in a document editing it, if you grant access to another individual that you know you can trust, they can open the document as well, and you can see each other's cursors, you can see each other typing, you can collaborate in real time without needing to pass versions back and forth. So it's not a solution to every problem, but it is a very good solution to a niche problem where you are trying to collaborate on a single file with multiple authors all at once. All right, now I'm talking about Microsoft for the most part. I don't work for Microsoft. I'm not officially affiliated with them in any way. They do, in my professional opinion, currently have the best cloud storage offering to not-for-profit and charity registered charity organizations in the ACT and indeed Australia out of all of the competitors in that space. They did make some changes to their licensing and their offerings in mid-2025 as it relates to registered charities. Some of you may already be aware of this. It does mean that previous subscriptions that they offered for an either reduced fee or for free completely have been removed from that status and replaced with an ability to apply to Microsoft for grants, which may result in a steep discount or a completely free set of licenses. However, if you are a not-for-profit or represent a registered charity, Microsoft offer up to 300 users for completely free a business basic plan. What that includes is a bunch of stuff that they give you for free. The most important one for today is 1 terabyte of OneDrive storage for each user. So if you happen to have 300 users, that's 300 terabytes of space across your organization. Just to put things in perspective, 1 terabyte is 1,000 gigabytes, which on the right, the alternatives, is the amounts that are being offered. So 15 gigabytes from Google in Google Drive for free is the next best offering I was able to find, which is 1.5% as much as Microsoft give for free. If you already use products that are part of an ecosystem, if you're using Google Office, for example, rather than Microsoft Office, there may be some reasons that a Google Drive implementation would be more sensible for you. Similarly, if your organization makes a lot of use of iPads and Macs, you might already have accounts to use iCloud, which you can get 5 gigabytes per person for free. These file sizes are very, very big. 5 gigabytes would take you quite a while to fill unless you're storing a lot of videos, for example, that are quite space hungry. I'm a pretty heavy user of the internet myself, and while I'd never admit it in a recorded presentation, I may have a movie or two downloaded on my hard drive, and even I would struggle to fill 1 terabyte with data that I might want backed up in the cloud. So it's an enormous amount of space. But options exist, and everything I'm talking about today, while I am talking specifically when I'm talking about particular steps about Microsoft's OneDrive, the same principles apply to all of the competitors. And there are others beyond this. Some local providers can offer local clouds that they set up specifically for groups of organizations. So to keep things reasonably uncomplicated, we're going to stick with OneDrive as the terminology, but know that you're not in any way being pushed towards Microsoft. There are alternatives, although in my professional opinion, they don't offer as much or as good of a service. So jumping out ahead of some common concerns I hear about people who are looking at potentially adopting cloud storage for their organization. If the internet goes down, will you lose access to files? And the short answer is no. The synchronization requires the internet to work. However, if your file is saved on your work laptop and you're in the skies heading from one place to another and you've got no internet in the plane, you can keep tapping away on that document. It'll keep updating. It'll keep safe on that local device. And as soon as that device sees the internet again, it will resynchronize and make sure the most up-to-date version is everywhere it needs to be. So internet going down doesn't drop your access to files. Whether data will be available to people on the internet. The short answer is, unless you really try to make it available to everyone on the internet, it won't be. By default, these systems are set up to include only access to the person who created the file, which would generally be the person who's listening to me now. If you choose, you can invite somebody else to view the file on a file-by-file and folder-by-folder basis. You get to determine at that point whether they can just see it and read it or whether they're allowed to edit it. There is an option that you can make things available to the open internet by giving a link that anyone who clicks on can see the data on the other side. It's impossible to do by accident. You have to try to make the data available on the internet for that to actually happen. Locking oneself into a particular technology provider or technology ecosystem. It's another common concern, and ordinarily I am very much on team avoid vendor lock-in. With regards to cloud storage, the offerings are fundamentally the same. They are offering you some space that you can move files into, move files out of, and potentially then access previous versions and restore if something's been accidentally deleted. The actual process of moving from one provider to another is literally as simple as dragging and dropping the folders out of OneDrive into another vendor solution. And none of the associated products, such as Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, etc., none of those require you to use OneDrive, and OneDrive doesn't require you to use any of those. So using a technology like OneDrive, like Dropbox, it doesn't lock you into that vendor any more than buying a laptop locks you into whoever made the hard drive that's inside. It's very easy to migrate, and you're not obliged in any way to start paying for it unless there's some fundamental change, or to stick with that technology provider for anything else that they offer. Which raises another question I get, which is, could Microsoft go snooping through the files that are sitting in OneDrive? And the answer for any large-scale cloud storage provider is, by design, no. When these systems are set up, they are set up with safeguards against what in our industry we refer to as bad actors. It's a theoretical exercise that you go through as you're securing your environment, thinking through, if I had all of the permissions possible and I wanted to do harm or I wanted to steal data, how can we proactively design the system so that I still can't, even with all of that access? So Microsoft, Google, Apple, all of these big players have their cloud storage set up in such a way that while they can see how much space is being used and possibly information as far as how many total files there are, they won't be able to see the file names, the file types, or what the actual files include. That is all encrypted from even their view, unless you explicitly grant them access, which for Microsoft will be a pretty weird thing to do, but do whatever you like. It's your cloud space. And none of this actually stops you accidentally deleting everything. If you forget that there's a file in that folder that's very important and delete the folder, you might absolutely lose some data. However, on these cloud storage services, and while it does differ from one technology to the next, all of them have some recovery option where nothing is deleted permanently until a serious amount of time has elapsed. So after you accidentally delete a file, you've generally got somewhere between weeks and months to go through the process of getting it back. And they make that process quite simple as well. Most of these solutions are designed to be operated primarily by non-technical users. So there's a few buttons to click to set them up, next, finish type installers, and then they just run. In the event that you do end up with a catastrophic data loss, if you know your account details to log back in, you're safe. And if you really need help, anyone with a little bit of IT experience should be able to maneuver any of these solutions if you don't feel confident yourself, even though I promise they are quite simple. So the core principles around cloud storage and why it's so valuable: your files live in more than one place. So if you do have a catastrophic loss of a piece of equipment, it doesn't mean that the files are gone as well. The access to the content of your cloud storage folder is tied to accounts, chiefly yours, but if you grant other people access, theirs as well. And it matters much less which device it's being accessed from, so long as you can sufficiently prove that it's you logging in, you can get access to those files again. You're in full control over who gets to see or edit amongst the files that are in there and directories. So by default, again, it will only be the owner of the space who gets to see or edit anything. And if you choose to take steps to extend that access, you can, but you can just as easily remove that access. If you have, for example, everyone in your organization has access to a particular folder, if someone were to leave, you can very easily just take their name off the list and they will lose access to the contents of that folder from that point forward. Another important thing, whilst it's not so much to do with the digital resilience, changes and deletions can be undone. And as I mentioned up top, one of the most common causes of data loss is simple accidents, whether it's a dropped laptop, a deleted folder. Any of these things can be undone once you've got cloud storage by simply undeleting a file, as much as that isn't a word, or reverting to a previous version in the event that a change has saved over the top and you've accidentally lost stuff as a result. And very importantly as well, this all works in the background. You take a few steps up front and then it will just quietly protect your data. These systems are very quiet when they're working perfectly. They're very noisy when something goes wrong. You'll see pop-ups if it can't sign in. You'll see pop-ups if it finds that there's a newer version on the cloud than you have on your device, but that they've diverged in some way. The messages are generally quite human readable. They explain what the problem is, and they invite you to a button click as to how you would like to solve it. So an example might be if you're up in a plane tapping away at a file and you touch down, it connects to the internet and it finds out someone else in your organization was editing the file at the same time. But while you had no internet access, the two versions have grown apart in terms of their content. The general, and I have to be general here because each of the technologies works a little bit differently on how it does this, but generally you will immediately get alerted that this has happened, and both copies of the file will get kept for you to manipulate which bits from which file together as you like. So the critical or the principle here is if it doesn't say anything's wrong, it means everything's ticking along. It is a set and forget type thing, unless you start taking advantage of those additional features like being able to access your files in their up-to-date format from any device. So a realistic baseline, a good enough and does everything that I'm talking about edition would be from today's talk. If you were to download and install OneDrive, you can swap that technology out for whichever one you prefer, although OneDrive I really do think is the best. You will log into that with a Microsoft account. If you don't already have one, you can create one. If you don't already have an organizational account, you can get access to that completely free, Microsoft 365 Business Basics, if you are a not-for-profit or registered charity organization. And once you've logged in, the next step of the install will ask you to choose folders that you would like to be synchronized into the cloud. And it will pop up with options like, what about documents? What about pictures? What about downloads? And you choose those directories. If they're the ones that you already use, then awesome. You virtually don't need to change anything at all. Just keep working as you were before. But if you would like to particularly, you can set folders that are specifically to be backed up. If there's some stuff that you don't want to sit on the cloud for some reason, perfectly fine. You keep that somewhere else and move only the most precious files into the OneDrive directory or Google Drive, Dropbox, whichever the technology provider is. Again, all of these technologies work a little bit differently, but one thing they all do that is the same is a tick will appear next to files that have been successfully synchronized to the cloud. It'll appear either on the icon or in a column, but all of these technologies will show you a green tick of some sort if the file is safe and on the cloud. And that's it. You're all set up and your files are safe. From that point forward, if you save any new files that need to be synchronized to the cloud or you would like to make sure are backed up, save them into OneDrive or again, Google Drive, iCloud, wherever, then those will just join the rest in staying synchronized. And then if or more likely when a device fails sometime in the future, to get those files back, you just download and install OneDrive or whichever, log into it again, choose those same folders you chose before. You'll see that they've got contents when you do it the second time, and then watch all the files just download and reappear on the device. And it's as easy as that. You've got all of that knowledge that was stored in those documents back up to the point that they were last saved and can hopefully salvage whatever has come of that disaster you've experienced, try and get access to hardware again, etc. But at least you know whatever device you next log on with, you'll be able to get those files up and on screen again. So the key takeaways, if you leave with nothing else today, I would hope to impress upon you these 6 things. Files are critical organizational assets. It's not something that we normally think about, but it is very much the product of labor, of critical thinking, and of your talented individuals putting work into things. We want to make sure that they are being treated as assets and as such protected. The cloud isn't some fancy technical concept. It can look that way, but fundamentally the cloud is just a computer across the internet with some caveats around what that actually means, but it is just someone else's computer. Every IT device will fail eventually. I'm sure most of you have had a mobile phone that's broken or a laptop that hasn't booted up one day. Planning under the assumption that it will fail means you can take steps now that safeguard the future. And when it does fail, it's not quite the crisis that it would have been otherwise. Cloud storage protects you automatically. Once it's set up, it just works from that point forward. And as I mentioned, they are very noisy. If something isn't working, they will alert you if you're not signed in, if something's gone wrong in human readable messages, so that you can take appropriate steps to resolve whatever is going wrong. I only stress that it does sort of call out when things are going wrong, because being kind of technical myself and doing a whole lot of stuff that these cloud storage solutions weren't initially designed for, I do trip it up now and then. But with regards to just having files that synchronize up to the cloud and then back down, I've never seen any of these technologies, and I've used all the ones that were on the screen before. I've never seen any of those fault. Free tools are often the deserving of being a bit suspicious. Why would they give you a good product for free? And the fundamental is that these are foundational pieces of protection that most of these big companies couldn't make a lot of money on if they wanted to. They've got plenty of space in their server environments, and they're happy to give bits of it away to organizations who qualify for whichever scheme that they're running. Because that way they know that that person's data is safe, and hopefully that engenders some goodwill, and maybe you want to buy some of their products in the future because they looked after you early on. When cloud storage first became available over the internet some 15 years ago, it was a bit of a skeptical art. Things have settled down now, such that the dominant players all offer effectively the same features for free within some sort of limit. And as I mentioned, the 1 terabyte limit that Microsoft are currently offering is absolutely enormous. So if it was my $0, I would be going that way. And you don't need to do much to be resilient. It's not a particularly sexy part of IT, doing protection of files. It's something that I care deeply about because of the consequences when it goes wrong. If things aren't backed up, seeing people lose all of that intellectual property or all of those photos, whatever the data is, and I suppose my overall message, if it was worth saving, it was probably worth safekeeping. And taking a few simple steps up front can save you a massive headache down the line. So with that, thank you all very much for your time, and I have some time for questions if there are any.
Great, thanks so much for that presentation. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to put in the chat and I can ask on your behalf, or feel free to turn on your mic?
While those are coming in, I'm just going to flash up. We've got, being an IT company, we can't not have a QR code. This is my digital contact card if anyone wants to take a copy. Arcadian, the company I work for, we have a program we call the Community Impact Program, where we do stuff like this, the talks that we're giving today, making ourselves available for not-for-profits and registered charities that we can help with our knowledge and our skill in some way. So even if it's not a question about the topic today, if you just need someone who knows a bit about IT to answer a question, feel free to save my information.
Heather has just said, thanks, Troy and Leanne for organizing, heading to my next meeting. We have Beth with her hand up. Feel free to turn on your mic, Beth. Oh, sorry, we can't hear you, Beth.
Can you hear me now?
Oh,
Yes.
There we go. Perfect, thanks.
Okay. If I have the cloud at home and I've got both a desktop and a laptop, I should be able to see what's in the cloud on both devices. Is that right?
That is correct,
Yeah.
yes. As long
Why
as you're
do they
logging
appear
in.
different
Sorry?
at times? You know, they're on the same Wi-Fi,
Mhm.
but some of the files don't seem to be available on, say, the laptop, which I'm turning off less often, or
Mhm.
some of the files, for example, I've changed the icons on the
Yep.
little folder so it's quicker to recognize, and that shows up on my desktop, but it doesn't show up when I open my laptop, which makes it more confusing to find things. Is that just a flaw of the process, or am I doing something wrong?
No, that is it is a limitation. When you do things like set icon colors or custom icons, it looks like it's applying to those files and folders themselves. But what it's actually doing is writing a little bit of code inside that computer saying, when you show this file, show it with that icon. And
Okay.
that code doesn't get copied across into the cloud.
Okay.
There are workarounds where you can sort of get something similar happening if you're using products like Microsoft Teams, which is sort of the next level above OneDrive that you can collaborate with, where you can set icons and synchronize those across. But for basic use, it really only understands it is a file or it is a folder and not a lot more than that.
Okay. Well, good. Thank you.
That's all right.
Are there any other questions that people might have? I don't think so. Okay. Well, thank you so much for that
Thank you.
presentation. It was really cool. As always, we also have more information sessions and training coming up. You can go onto our events and training page on our website to register for those. I have also recorded this session, so everyone that has registered, even if they haven't joined this session, will be able to do a watch back and listen to the presentation. Yeah, and I think that's it. I just want to say thanks again to Troy and Steph for coming and presenting to us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
Great, thanks so much.
Take
All right,
care.
Thanks,
bye.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.